I've been playing outdoors since I was a kid, standing by the front door at around 2 years old, hollering, side, 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 trying to get my mom to let me go play outside. Now, after 30 plus years working in the outdoor business, I'm dropping insider conversations every week with the brand leaders, guides, marketers, CEOs, and others to make the outdoor industry a trillion-dollar juggernaut that drives product innovation, revenue, and public policy for everything outdoors. I'm Rick Sayes. Welcome to the Outdoor Biz Podcast. Hello again, everyone, and welcome to episode 455 of the Outdoor Biz Podcast with Mark Johnson and Hobnail Trekking, brought to you this week by TeePublic. Visit ricksayes.com/tpublic and find something to add to your tea collection. I know you have one. Hobnail Trekking was born during the blazing Tennessee summer of 2016 after Mark Johnson, a communications director at the time, happened to unexpectedly meet an Everest region Sherpa who was in the U.S. to promote the Nepali trekking industry. Mark shares that story and how today, Hobnail Trekking has expanded into several other destinations and continues to offer only the highest levels of service and trekking expertise. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Hey, glad to be here, Rick. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you. I love talking to all you guys that have these interesting businesses of, true adventure businesses where you get people out and about. It's pretty fun. It was great to meet you at the Adventure Travel Trade Association event. That was a fantastic event.
Yep, that was a blast.
Yeah,
and that was up in my neck of the woods near where I grew up. So, up in the North Carolina mountains. So it was fun to be there for me.
Yeah, I bet. Did you spend any time going out and about when we weren't so busy at the conference? Did you go check out some old haunts?
I did a little bit. I'd be honest with you. Most of my time was at the Airbnb working because my wife, Holly, was the representative at the meeting. So she was doing the meeting stuff and I was doing, business stuff at the Airbnb most of the time.
Nice.
But
it was busy. I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, it was very well attended.
Yeah. The last one I went, I think I mentioned it to you while we were there, was in Alaska. One of their summit events in Alaska. That was a great one too. I'm already trying to figure out how I can get to Panama. That'll be awesome.
Yeah, you and I both. I would love to do that as well.
Yeah, that'll be fun. So tell us a little bit about the story behind the founding of Hobnail Trekking. What inspired you guys to start this business?
Well, it's a long and sordid tale, Rick.
They usually are.
It's a little bit unlikely. This all started probably around 20 years ago when my wife, Holly, happened to pick up the John Krakauer book, Into Thin Air, which a lot of people in this business are aware of that book, all about the 1996 Everest disaster. So she read it and I read it, and we both became fascinated with Mount Everest. Certainly not with climbing Mount Everest because we didn't want to die, but we became fascinated with the culture and Nepal and that whole thing. And then a couple of years later, Holly noticed that one of her college friends was posting pictures on Facebook back in its very early days about trekking to Everest Base Camp. Now, neither one of us knew that this was a thing at all. And we both got rather excited about doing this. So Holly made a literal bucket list and put an Everest Base Camp trek on it. And she made one for me too and put it on.
Nice.
And so, as you do, we just ignored this bucket list for years while raising our three kids. We were not world travelers. We were not adventurers.
Wow.
We were just a normal couple who enjoyed the occasional camping trip and being outdoors when time allowed.
Had you been backpacking or anything? Nothing.
No, just, I mean, I had grown up hunting and fishing in the North Carolina mountains.
Mm-hmm.
So I was naturally an outdoors person, but this was not part of what we did on a regular basis. And we had no idea how to do something like an Everest Base Camp trek.
Right.
So remember, this was before adventure travel was super easy to find and research on the internet,
right,
like it is today. So fast forward to the summer of 2016, and at that time I was the director of communications for a very large wildlife conservation NGO here in Tennessee. And I was becoming very disenchanted with that job, and I had begun to look around for something else. And one day that summer, I needed some work done on my old pickup truck, and I dropped it off at my mechanic shop in Nashville and Ubered back to my office The night before, I had applied for a corporate communications position with the rideshare company Lyft. So
Okay.
when my truck was ready to be picked up that afternoon, I downloaded the Lyft app, which I had never used, never downloaded. And I hailed a ride just so I could experience their service in case, I was called for an interview.
Right.
So this young guy picked me up. He was of some Asian descent, and which I was not sure of where he was from. And he picked me up. We had about 10 minutes to my mechanic shop, and we had a great conversation about Lyft and just really hit it off.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was stepping out of his car, just out of curiosity, I asked this guy, I said, and his name was Dawa. And I said, Dawa, where are you from anyway? He said, Nepal.
Oh,
Well,
interesting.
I immediately sat back down in the car and I closed the door. And I said, Nepal?
Yeah.
I said, you know anything about the Everest Base Camp trek? And he just looked at me and he got this big smile on his face. And he said, Mr. Mark, I'm an Everest region Sherpa. I own a small trekking company in Kathmandu, and I've guided that trek dozens of times.
Wow.
So you could have knocked me over with a feather, of course. And I said, hey, would you consider meeting with me and my wife to discuss this? So we quickly exchanged phone numbers. So that was a Wednesday. The next day, I parted ways with my company.
Wow.
Just
Really?
incidentally, it had nothing to do with meeting Dawa.
Uh-huh.
It was just coincidence. So that Saturday, Holly and I met with Dawa for about an hour at a local Starbucks. And by the time that meeting was over, we had committed to an EBC trek 18 months later.
Wow.
So we had no idea how we would afford it, where I might be working then, or who would look after our children for those 20 days. But we just
the children.
That's right. Oh yeah. So we literally just took a leap of faith.
Wow.
So over probably the next 3 months, whenever we would mention this to people in casual conversation, they would always respond with, really? Wow.
Yeah,
that's
an amazing story.
And so one day I was out for a walk and the idea of this business just landed on my head from literally out of the blue. I thought to myself, hey, I'm unemployed. I've got years of experience in marketing and communications.
Mm-hmm.
I know how to build websites. Holly is very experienced in budgeting and business systems. Dawa already has his business set up in Nepal, but he doesn't have any marketing experience. So why don't we just combine forces and start a little company?
Mm-hmm.
So within 2 months, we had launched Hobnail Trekking Company, and Holly and I began giving in-person presentations about the Everest Base Camp trek, having never once set foot in Nepal. So yeah, it was crazy, and we were bold and probably a little bit stupid, but we just moved forward and did it.
I don't know. I love those stories. I think those stories, so many businesses are started that way, right? Somebody just is toiling away at something they don't love or unemployed or something.
Yep.
And they've had this idea or a couple of ideas noodling around in their brain, and then something happens, right? They connect with somebody or they go somewhere or something, and the whole thing just evolves from there. And the way it evolves is so organic. It seems like the success is built in because of that organic evolution.
And it's, I tell young people all the time, you have to be open, right? You don't have to, but you should be open to opportunities when they present themselves.
Yeah.
And, I could have very easily have just said, oh, cool, you're from Nepal, and just walked away.
Right.
Had I done that, none of this would have ever happened.
Right.
I think about that moment very often.
Because and it's interesting the way the universe works too, because you guys were, thinking about that, right? Just started thinking about that. And then all of a sudden you meet a guy from Nepal in a Lyft thing. It's the way the universe works sometimes. It just drops these opportunities in your lap. And if you're, smart enough and creative enough and, adventurous enough to take advantage of them, then they blossom into cool stuff.
Turn out.
That's awesome.
They can turn out to into something interesting and good.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what makes Hobnail Trekking unique compared to the other companies? I mean, your birth of the business is pretty unique, but what about the trips and things like that?
Well, I don't necessarily, every trip that we offer is something that is unique to Hobnail Trekking Company.
Hmm.
That's one of our stipulations is that everything must be something that you can really only get through us as much as possible. Now, there are some treks that are pretty much the same as somebody else because there's no way to change that. But
Hmm.
I think mainly, Rick, it is our origin story and in our perspective. We don't fit the traditional mold, if you will, of the owners of an adventure travel company.
Right.
I think most of us would, I think most of us would agree that that traditional mold would be somebody who had probably grown up in the industry, probably started out as a guide, is probably hardcore, highly experienced outdoor uh, person, but they've probably traveled extensively, and all those things are great. That's awesome.
Hmm.
Holly and I, on the other hand, we come from the perspective of middle-aged, very normal parents who love the outdoors, but were casual and occasional travelers with very little adventure experience. So
Hmm.
we created Hobnail Trekking Company mostly to target people like us, people
Hmm.
who dreamed about doing big epic things, but were a little intimidated by the idea.
Right.
So 7 years later, Holly and I certainly have a lot more experience as adventure travelers, and we've developed some street cred in the adventure travel business. But, Hobnail is still informed by our backgrounds as very normal middle class Americans, who were presented by what I consider to be a providential opportunity, like we just talked about,
Right.
that initial meeting with Dawa, and we just decided to follow it. So honestly, Rick, we were probably the least qualified people on earth to launch an international adventure travel company.
Right.
But nevertheless, here we are
Yeah.
7 years later. So I think that's the biggest difference is, our approach to developing these itineraries is just going to be different because of our backgrounds.
Yeah. Had you traveled at all? Had you gone on a plane to visit family somewhere or anything? You didn't even do
Oh
that?
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
okay. You had that.
I
Okay.
had been, I spent 15 years as a musician,
Oh,
um,
okay.
and a professional musician and songwriter. So I had traveled a lot in the US and the Caribbean and stuff, but we had never really done any serious overseas travel
That's
until
amazing.
this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's amazing. Yeah. And that's probably a good, I mean, obviously it's a good and bad thing. Obviously you didn't know some of the pitfalls, but that's probably
right.
sometimes good. You don't know some of the pitfalls, so you just go forward and continue moving forward regardless of what drops in front of you.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, very cool.
Mhm.
So, what are some of the most popular treks you guys offer, and why do you think they resonate? I was looking online, and you do offer pretty unique things, like we were talking about the Spain trek.
Right.
Yeah, those are pretty. Those are I love those because they're not. I have really bad knees, and I can't do any of the Himalayan stuff and anymore because I just wouldn't be able to get through the trek. But some of those
Sure.
other, things like the Spain trek and some of the other more relaxed ones are right up my alley. Do you cater to a more older crowd, do you think? What resonates with your customers?
Yeah. Well, our crowd tends to be, I would say, 45 to 65.
Hmm.
We do get a lot of retirement age people, but, and you're right, we try to have things that cater to really to about every level of fitness and ability.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
Um, to a certain extent, I mean, you're still going to have to be fairly fit to do what we offer. As far as the most popular treks, I have to say that Everest Base Camp is definitely our best seller.
Hmm.
Um,
Interesting.
and there, first of all, there's no particular location on planet Earth that is more well known,
Right.
and it's more of an exotic and adventurous mental image than Mount Everest. I mean, that's just going to be the case.
Yeah, and one of the icons of adventure, right? Everybody wants to at least go see it.
It
Yeah.
is, there might be locations that sound more extreme and hardcore, like, K2 or
Right.
Siberia or something like that. But literally, there's no place on Earth that's as iconic as you said as Mount Everest.
Hmm.
And I think as long as there's people on this planet, they're going to want to know about Mount Everest, and people are going to want to see that with their own two eyes.
Right.
And then after that, I'd say that our treks are fairly evenly spread in popularity. I think Peru is probably the next most popular. And then we offer places that are very much off the beaten path as far as bucket list stuff goes for people. And they're, like the Balkans of
Yeah.
Montenegro. We've just opened up in Ecuador, and these are amazing places, but people are just kind of learning about them now
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of cases. So I expect those places to do in the long run.
Yeah, I just dropped an episode with Jorge Perez from Tierra del Volcan in Ecuador. Yeah, a couple weeks ago. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
that's an interesting place. Yeah. Um, and some of the Camino trek looks pretty interesting. Obviously, the Andalusian the
Hmm.
Andalusian trek looks pretty interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, you guys have some, even though you're not doing high mountain adventure, you're doing very interesting locations.
Well, we've wanted to keep it. We don't want to be a climbing company.
Hmm.
We always want to keep our stuff such that, anybody that has a level of fitness can do almost anything. You don't need to be certified in anything. You don't need to have experience with ropes and crampons and stuff.
Right, right.
So yeah, that's always going to be the case, I think.
And anytime you're walking off the, sidewalk, for example, you're going to do a trek, there's challenges, there's things that you could get injured. How do you ensure the safety and well-being of your folks during the treks, especially in some of the more challenging environments? Do you hire other
Yeah.
guides?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I mean, whenever you're traveling overseas and doing any type of adventurous activity, safety has to be the first concern.
Hmm.
So for us, to begin with, we require our clients to carry travel insurance that is appropriate for whatever activity they're going to be engaging in.
Hmm.
For example, some insurance policies cover high altitude evacuations and some don't.
Right.
So you need to have the correct policy for what you're doing. Um, and then our guides and our staff have to have a way to be in contact with first responders,
Mhm.
off the trail staff members, and some cases helicopter companies. And if they're in areas that don't have cell service, our guides will carry sat phones. They're also going to have wilderness first aid training and other certifications like that are similar to that, and they're always going to carry first aid materials.
Mhm.
And in most cases, that's going to be overkill because we don't
Yeah.
generally do things that are particularly dangerous.
Yeah. It rarely happens, but it does happen.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
And but what I tell people, Rick, is that there's always going to be some risk involved in traveling anywhere. And if what you're doing carries zero risk, frankly, it's probably not worth doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just something that you accept when you go off to do epic things.
Yeah. And do you have offices in each one of these countries where you offer something?
Well, we have staff
Staff,
in each
yeah.
one of these places and partner staff.
Mhm.
So yeah, we do have offices.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you share a memorable experience or story from one of the treks that stands out to you?
Oh my gosh. Well, one thing I've learned, Rick, is that it's not the things that go right that you necessarily remember when you're doing treks.
That's
It's
right.
it's the things that go wrong.
Yeah.
And short of somebody getting seriously injured, it's the stories of the shared experiences of people going through adversity together that you're going to end up telling stories about for years
Well,
later.
and those are the things that make the best stories, right? I mean, sometimes if
Exactly.
everything's going smoothly and nothing happens or you don't see anything wild or anything, oh, okay, well, nice. You had a nice walk. Great. But as soon as
Exactly.
something goes south, let me tell you.
Right. And for me personally, it was probably, getting lost on a trek in Peru
Oh, wow.
last year up in the mountains near Juarez. I made my way down a mountain road by myself, expecting to see my group's bus waiting for me at the bottom of this mountain, and there was no bus. So I literally found myself alone in Peru, not being able to speak Spanish,
Wow.
and not knowing where the hell I was. I had a few snacks and a little water left in my camelback, but so I just made myself a little clearing in a grove of trees that was beside this road. I used my backpack as a pillow and I just took a nap. I I figured at that point the organizers would discover me missing and come find me, and eventually they did.
And I got to be rested in case I got to walk all the way to somewhere.
Yeah, I was
I
just
love
going to
it.
chill,
Yeah.
So I later found out that I'd made a wrong turn at a fork in the road or the trail where there should have been a staff member stationed to point me in the right direction.
Oh.
There was no one there. So I'm not gonna name names, but that particular trek was a master class in how not to organize and run a multi-day trekking adventure.
Right.
And myself and my fellow adventure travel professionals who were on that trek, we learned some valuable lessons because there was a lot of stuff that went wrong. There was probably, I think there were about 10 of us, and we now we refer to ourselves as survivors of the Peruvian Death March.
Nice. That's good. There you get it's a story, right? There you go.
It is. And it sucked then, but it has made for some, hilarious conversation since then.
Yeah. Well, and oftentimes too, when you run a business like that, you don't realize the holes in your process until something goes south. And then you recognize, oh, we got to change this because XYZ happened. The death march happened, or whatever it might be.
I mean, like I said, it was super valuable because thank God it wasn't any one of our companies that were organizing this adventure. It was somebody else.
Oh,
didn't have to take the hit
yeah.
for experiencing this and then knowing, okay, these are all things that we need to never do with our own companies.
Mm-hmm.
But, I'll tell you that other organization has taken a hit for that.
Oh, really? Oh, that's too bad. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that stuff happens. So how do you select and train your guides to make sure that they have all the best, they can have all the training, but also can provide the best experience for your clients?
Well, like most outbound companies, we partner with local tour operators and DMCs in our destination countries to handle the boots on the ground parts of our trek. So through the connections that we've made, mostly through ATA, Adventure Travel Trade Association, we've been able to meet some of the best and most experienced tour operators really in the world.
Yeah, great collection of folks.
Yep, to serve as our white label partners. So, in several cases, our people have handled, or they did handle all the tours for REI before REI exited the international travel space back in 2020.
Interesting.
So for Hobnail, it then becomes a matter of finding partners with a strong emphasis on safety and customer experience and sustainability, and even more a value system that really aligns with us, with ours.
You have a vetting process you go through?
Our vetting process is really lots and lots of discussion.
Yeah.
Yep.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yep.
And do you go on a trek with them or an experience with them, or do you have somebody that or you book something through them?
Yeah, we do whenever we possibly can.
Yeah.
And if we don't have time to do that or can't do that, then we definitely visit with other people that have.
There you go. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So sustainability and responsible tourism are becoming increasingly more important. I guess that's it. I mean, they say that again. That's a double. That makes no sense. Let me try that again. Sustainability and responsible tourism are becoming increasingly important. How does Hobnail Trekking approach those issues?
Well, I think it's becoming trickier territory as our world becomes, more and more, I don't know, judgmental toward nearly every activity short of walking to the mailbox.
Right.
Here's my personal take on it, Rick. I personally believe that God created the planet Earth for his children to discover and enjoy, and yes, to treat with care and respect. I also believe that places like Mount Everest or Machu Picchu or Kilimanjaro or the Amazon rainforest shouldn't be the exclusive domain of only the indigenous people who live within a 20-mile radius of that place.
Mm-hmm.
Nor should that be the case for Nashville, Tennessee, where I live,
Mm-hmm.
or the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, where I grew up. I think that as long as we live in a free society, we should be able to travel and see these God-given creations rather than curling up in fetal position on our couches and never going anywhere or seeing anything for fear that we might have a negative impact on that particular piece of ground.
Yeah, scared to death of the world. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think as an adventure travel company, we handle this by aligning ourselves with vetted tour operators, like we were just saying,
Mm-hmm.
who take sustainability very seriously. And they build that philosophy into their everyday operations rather than constantly beating their clients over the head with it to the point that, all enjoyment is just sucked out of their experience.
Right.
In my 7 years of doing this, I have yet, knock on wood, I've yet to encounter a situation where one of our clients was insensitive to this stuff.
Mm.
And to the contrary, they are usually very proactive in protecting their environment and more than that, respecting the local cultures in a way that's helpful and not harmful to these indigenous communities.
Yeah.
I know that's kind of a long answer, but it's a complicated question.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's a level-headed approach. I mean, I think, there's a lot of folks these days that think that they have whether it's the right or whatever you want to call it, but can go do whatever they want, wherever they want. And,
Yep.
As you said, we only have this one planet, this one home that we know about so far. And
Right.
if we continue to, destroy it, for lack of a better term, then pretty soon there's not going to be anything for our ancestors to inhabit. So I think that's a good approach. Yeah.
I think and that's what makes it tricky, that we do have one home.
Yeah.
But the other extreme to that is, like I said, we all just curl up on our couches and never
Right.
do anything.
Right.
So if we do that, then in theory, the world would stay pristine. But, that's not what we're meant to do, in my view. I think
Yeah.
we're meant to get out and experience the world.
I agree. Yeah, I
So
agree.
we have to just be judicious about how we go about that.
Think about it. Yeah. Well, good on you. So how do you prepare clients for the physical and mental demands of trekking?
Well, I think the first step is getting yourself as physically fit as you possibly can in the time that you have before departure.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's just so you'll enjoy the experience more.
Right.
This doesn't mean that you have to become a triathlon athlete
Right.
with 2% body fat, I think it does mean that you should try to lose as much extra weight as you can. I think you should get your legs and feet used to hiking long distances.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you should try to build up your cardio system as much as possible. But I think even a little more specifically, if I'm talking to people about doing a multi-day trek, I tell them that you should try to mimic the conditions and the activities that you're going to be doing on that trek as much as you possibly can in your training.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if you're going to be doing the Everest Base Camp trek, that you're going to have roughly 14 consecutive days of hiking. So as much as possible, try to schedule multiple consecutive days of hiking into your training routine.
And at elevation.
Well, you may not be able to do that.
Yeah, that's true.
If you live in
Nebraska,
in South Carolina, and honestly, Rick, this is another reason why we created this company, because if you look at at how companies that do this are distributed across the U.S., far and away, most of them are in the western part of our country.
Mm-hmm.
So very few are in the Southeast United States.
Mm-hmm.
There's just not a huge culture of adventure travel in this part of the country. And we have wanted to change that. And because there's plenty of people here that would love to go do epic things, just
Right.
like there are on the West Coast.
Right.
So you can't recreate altitude when you live in South Carolina. So
That's
you,
tough.
you have to do other things. And I'll also say, and this is always a controversial topic, but I don't believe that you can train for altitude. I think based on what I've learned, altitude is a function of genetics. Your ability to operate at altitude is a function of genetics more than anything else.
Mm.
So we've had people that have done high altitude treks that were marathon runners
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
were from Colorado that struggled much more than somebody from the flatlands of Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we've learned is I saw a guy once say that if you want to be able to operate at altitude, choose your parents wisely.
That's good advice. Yeah. I've read
Yeah,
that too. Yeah. Yeah. It is an interesting component because you're right. Some people have no problems at altitude and other people struggle and they've done all this extra work. So you never
right.
know how you're going to respond. But I think there's some level, like you say, walking and, getting yourself in the best physical shape you possibly can where you live with what you have to work with, at least
Right.
as the jacks are better to get in the game.
I think that if just prior to let's just say the Himalayas, just prior to leaving for the Himalaya, if you could spend time at 14,000 feet somewhere here in the U.S. on the top of a mountain, sure, that would be good because it would give you a jump on your acclimatization.
And the experience of what it's like to be at that elevation and breathe or not breathe.
That's right.
Yeah.
But there again, it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to do that. So the only way to really know how you're going to operate is to put yourself in at altitude. And when you do that, if you can do it in the best physical condition that you can be, you're going to be in it. You're going to be at somewhat of an advantage.
Right.
But and I tell people, even when you can't recreate these altitudes and even inclines and descents, you can certainly mimic the process of getting up early for consecutive days, pulling on your boots, and go do 5 or 6 miles,
Right.
even if they're flat miles,
Mm-hmm.
because that's always more of a mental challenge than a physical one.
Yeah.
And I'd argue that it's even harder in training because you don't necessarily have a prize at the end of all that work like you
Yeah.
do if you're on the trek itself.
Right. And you're going to look at your boring old neighborhood as opposed to the beautiful mountains. Yeah.
Seeing the same old thing over and over again.
Yeah. Right.
So, and I would say, as far as the physical part of it goes, I recommend a lot of body weight stuff, squats, lunges, push-ups, sit-ups,
Mm-hmm.
and stair climbing, if that's at all possible.
Yeah. That's good advice. Hey, are you a t-shirt fanatic like me? I'm always on the lookout for new t-shirts. I have a collection of tees with funny sayings, inspiring graphics, or just something with a simple message. And I often find them at TeePublic. TeePublic has all kinds of apparel, including Outdoor Biz tees, hats, and more. Visit ricksays.com/teepublic and find something to add to your tee collection today. I know you have one. That's ricksays.com/teepublic. Now, back to the show. What about some of the cultural experiences your clients might encounter on a hobnail trek? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, there's a million of them.
Yeah, you guys go to some unique places.
We do, and we're always going to incorporate the cultural element to everything that we do. That's part of the adventure. So we've been talking about Nepal. You're not only going to experience the Sherpa culture when you're on the trail, but also what life is like in Kathmandu, which is a totally different thing.
Right, right.
In Ecuador and Peru, you're going to experience the Quechua culture in the Andes. You're going to go to like local livestock and produce markets. You're going to be in farms and restaurants and haciendas, and you're going to experience that with your guides and porters. But those are just the kind of the incidental things. I would say we do a trek called the Peaks of the Balkans, which
Yeah,
is,
that's an interesting one.
yeah, and that's in Montenegro and Albania and possibly a little in Kosovo. And on that trek, you're gonna interact with the locals, and you're gonna have a homestay with a shepherd family high up in the accursed mountains,
Wow.
which are also called the Albanian Alps. And that's an area that's only been open to foreigners within the past 15 years.
Right.
On one of our Peruvian treks, you're going to have an overnight stay with a family on one of the floating islands of Euros at Lake Titicaca.
Cool.
And you're going to get to exchange stories and experiences and break bread with these locals. And the list just goes on and on. I mean, when Holly and I develop these itineraries, the cultural exchange part is, like I said, it's every bit as important as the adventure part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and it's fascinating when you get to meet some of the locals. I did a trek in Georgia a few years ago, which was just fascinating because,
Yep.
that part of the world was closed off like the Balkans for so long.
Yep.
And we got
Yep.
to do this trek through the countryside and met all the locals and, couldn't really speak with them, but it was just, they were happy. We were happy. It was really cool to experience and see. It was super
I
fun.
mean, that's the best part of all of this. I
Yeah.
mean, you can hike anywhere,
Right.
but hiking within different cultures is what makes it really special and
Yeah.
life-changing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm spending time with them. Yeah. How has the trekking industry changed since you started Hobnail?
Well, that's an interesting question because honestly, Rick, I still consider myself to be a baby in this industry. Um, so for us, I can't speak to how it's changed over the past 20 and 30 years.
No, yeah, you've only been what, 7, 10,
7 years.
7 years? Yeah, you're still
Uh,
a baby. Yeah,
we're still a baby, but COVID was the most obvious change for us.
right,
I mean, not to mention the fact that everybody was shut down for 2 years.
right.
The world's just seemed to be more carefree before 2020 in the same way that it was before 9/11. And that might just be my perspective, but you know, how it's going to be moving forward, I think that's going to largely be determined by how attitudes toward tourism progress in these destination countries,
Hmm.
um, and how, for us, how Americans view traveling in the future. Um, you know, I think that as long as tourism continues to be a big part of the economy of these amazingly beautiful countries, I think it's going to be incumbent on their governments to make adventure travelers welcome and to take care of their natural resources.
Yeah,
Uh, and as far as American travelers go, I like to believe that there's always going to be people who want to experience epic things in corners of the world that are different. We'll just have to wait and see how that's going to change. I've been seeing these crazy videos of people in Barcelona, like shooting tourists with squirt guns on the street because they're angry about over tourism
wow.
in in their city. So they're just outwardly disdainful of somebody coming and wanting to experience their city.
Yeah, yeah,
So there are things like that are a little frightening and a little concerning, but I really think that, as long as we can travel, we're going to want to travel and go see things.
yeah, I agree.
Um,
Yeah,
and how that changes the trekking industry, it just remains to be seen.
yeah. And I think the population growth, I think, is going to be the biggest thing that's going to change. Because, like you say, the whole planet is getting more and more populated. Every city is, growth is the one thing that we want constantly, but it's also the one thing that probably in the end is going to
Yep.
destroy the whole thing because we're just going to overpopulate. And we've seen that in smaller environments, right? Where you've got a population of deer or sheep or whatever it might be, and all of a sudden they get so big they overrun the land. There's not enough food. There's not enough this, and they die off.
Right.
So that's how long that's going to take. Who knows? But that's going to be an interesting thing, and I'm sure you and I won't be around to see it. I don't think.
But I would also say, Rick, and I'm sure you with this, as much as we talk about these things that seem scary
Yeah,
and seem negative,
yeah,
uh, every time I go somewhere, it's a glorious
yeah,
experience.
yeah,
And every time that I meet locals, almost without fail, they are incredibly welcoming and,
yeah,
and excited for us to be there.
yeah.
So, I don't want to sound negative about it. I think we still are blessed to be able to do this business and go see these places.
Yeah. And that's true around the world. Doesn't matter where you go. Everywhere you go, that's the same.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about technology? What role does technology play in your business, both in terms of operations and enhancing the client experience?
Well, that's a good question. I would say aside from the operation of a good functional website with a great intuitive user experience, honestly, I don't think it plays a huge role,
Mm,
technology. We do provide our clients with a mobile app, and that has certainly streamlined the travel experience,
mm,
and it puts things like itineraries and flight schedules, at the tip of your fingers. But the experience of hiking through an incredible landscape in a different country isn't or shouldn't be affected by technology, in my opinion.
right.
I mean, at its core, trekking only requires legs and feet.
Right.
And it's pretty much the same as it's been since the dawn of man,
Mm,
a cool mobile app or, I don't know, high-tech trekking poles, you know, aren't going to change that experience all that much. And frankly, I hope they never do because like I say, the basis of of what we do is about doing something that is as old as man, and people have always enjoyed just walking and hiking and experiencing things.
mhm.
So I don't think technology, aside from just the operational things like you mentioned,
Yeah.
it doesn't have a huge effect on what we do.
Yeah. That's good to hear. Yeah. Because, I don't like to see people out there with their phone out, snapping every photo and, just
Right.
walking, looking into their phone. It's just like, put that thing away and go look and breathe. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that we are obsessed with pointing our phones at things and this idea that everything is has to be captured for posterity's sake,
Right. Right.
rather than just experiencing that and the posterity part of it being in your head.
In your memory. Yeah. 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 And sharing those stories. Yeah. The thing has an off
Exactly.
button. Use it.
That's right.
I might make a t-shirt out of that.
There you go.
That's a good idea.
I'll buy that.
All right. Have any new destinations you guys are working on?
Yeah, we do. Yeah. We've got several. We
Any
just
you can talk
recently,
about, or you want to?
yeah,
Okay,
I'm
good.
happy to talk about it.
Cool.
We just recently introduced Ecuador into our lineup.
Cool.
Um, and as a matter of fact, I'm announcing our 15-day Ecuadorian Odyssey trip probably this week. This is going to be incredible. This is going to be a combination of snorkeling and hiking in the Galapagos Islands, kayaking and trekking in the Amazon rainforest, and trekking on the Kilauea and Cotopaxi volcanoes.
Wow, cool.
Yeah. There's going to be also elements of boating and canyoning and bird watching. And incidentally, I'll tell you, this is a little scoop, as if anybody really cares, but I'm going to give it to you anyway.
No, good, good. Yeah.
Uh,
We love
this is,
scoops.
yeah, this trek kind of represents the beginning of a rebranding effort that we are undertaking with Hobnail.
Oh, cool.
Uh, so over the next year or so, we're going to be expanding our offerings beyond only trekking and hiking, and we're going to change our name to Hobnail Adventures.
Nice.
So we're in addition to Ecuador, we're also working on adventures similar to that in Croatia, Slovenia, and the Azores of Portugal. And I would imagine we'll probably add Patagonia
Hmm.
fairly soon as well.
Good for you guys.
Yeah,
That's pretty exciting.
it is. Yeah, it is. As we both know, being in this industry, it's an exciting business to be in.
Yeah.
There, it's there's it's a lot of work, and frankly, I'd rather be out doing these treks myself rather than sitting in my office doing the business part of it.
Right.
But it is exciting the places that we get to develop these itineraries and offer them to our people. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
wonderful that way.
So, on that note, what advice would you give to someone looking to start their own adventure travel business?
Oh Lord. I would say to begin with, have another job
Yeah,
because
that's true with anything, I think. Yeah.
yeah, you're going to need an additional income stream
Yeah.
for a while. And then I'd say try to find a niche, build a fantastic website because that is your storefront online, and be prepared to speak in front of the public.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're going to need to make those personal connections with people.
That's a good one. I don't think anybody's ever mentioned that. That's a really good one because you're right. You're going to have to be able to stand up in front of groups, sell, educate, inform, all these things. That's good.
That's right.
Yeah.
You really, in my opinion, you can't be an introvert
Mm-hmm.
and succeed in this business. You have to be willing to put yourself out there and get in front of people.
Yeah, yeah,
And I know that's horrifying to think of for a whole lot of people,
yeah.
but you just got to get over that, do it a few times, and then you're going to be fine.
Yeah, once you do it, you find out how friendly and welcoming everyone is. It's a great, that's why I love the outdoor space, any part of it, adventure travel, traditional outdoor. That's the beauty of it. It's always like being amongst a group of friends.
Best people in the world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, yeah. What's been the most rewarding part of your journey with Hobnail?
Well, hands down, being able to fulfill other people's bucket lists and lifelong dreams. I mean, I know for a fact that had I not asked Dawa that question of where he was from
Yeah,
and sat back down in his car,
yeah,
I know that there are a lot of people who would have never experienced these life-changing moments.
yeah.
I mean, in some cases, our clients never even considered going to Nepal or Peru or Scotland or Montenegro because they had never encountered hobnail. And a trip like that suddenly became possible for them. It was the same thing as when it became possible for us. We see that in our clients. And, every time we get emailed a new photograph of a group, proudly holding the hobnail flag on some mountaintop,
Yeah,
we feel incredibly blessed and happy. Yeah.
yeah.
That's far and away the most rewarding part of it. It's not the money, trust me.
Yeah, yeah. No,
If
good on you.
you're getting in this to get rich, you might want to rethink that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Good on you. That's great. Yeah. What advice would you give to someone who wants to go on a trek to the Himalaya in particular?
Well, the main thing is stop putting it off.
Yeah, there you go.
The easiest thing in the world to do is to do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's never going to be a perfect time to schedule a trip. So stop waiting, put down your deposit and make it happen. You're never going to regret whatever sacrifices you had to make to accomplish this.
Right.
You're only going to wonder why you waited so long.
Right.
I tell people that all the time. I mean, it's just true. And I would also say, and this applies to any adventure travel trip, don't expect it to be a vacation.
Yeah.
It's not if you want a vacation, go to Myrtle Beach.
Yeah. Well, if you want a vacation where you're going to sit on the sand and sip drinks out of a straw and relax, right. Yeah. But if you want an active vacation,
yeah. I mean, we're not talking what we're talking about is a real adventure here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And adventures aren't always comfortable.
Right.
And there's going to be times when you're going to be tired and sore and cold and hot and really in need of a shower. But these are the things that make an adventure worth doing. Mm-hmm. And as you and I know, I mean, nobody's going to be bragging about getting sunburn on the beach and eating too much calabash shrimp when they're old and gray.
Right.
You're not going to remember those things.
Right.
So I know that's more of a philosophical answer to your question.
No, I love it. Yeah.
But the point is almost anybody can do this. You don't need to be quote unquote special to go to the Himalayas and trek. You just need to make a decision.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest advice that I could give people.
That's great advice. Just go. Yeah. What's your favorite piece of gear that you always have with you on your adventures?
Well, we were talking about cameras a minute ago, and whatever camera that I have at the time is usually my favorite piece of gear. You could call it that. I mean, just before my trip to Ecuador back in May, I bought it's called a DJI Pocket 2 gimbal camera. So DJI is mainly a drone company, but they have developed this little gimbal camera, handheld camera, that it's crazy.
Is that the OSMO? OSMO?
It is. Yes.
Yeah, I just got one of those too. It's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, it's like filming something with a Sharpie pen.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
literally fits in your pocket. And for me, when I go do treks, I'm half the reason that I'm there is to generate content.
Mm-hmm.
So to be able to do that with a camera that you can drop in and out of your pocket rather than carrying a big bulky
Yep.
thing around, that has made that my favorite piece of gear as of late.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
tool. I had one before and I didn't use it too much because I wasn't capturing that kind of content. But now that I'm doing the podcast and travel around and stuff, it's amazing. It's just super cool. Yeah.
Yep.
Good
And
one.
you're going to sacrifice, a little bit of resolution and, quality, I guess you would say, with a small camera like that. But the portability of it just makes up, it evens that out, in my opinion.
Yeah. But if you have your phone with you, then you can, and you want to snap something, a beautiful sunset that you're going to print and put on your wall, you're not going to get a, Ansel Adams size 50 by 60 print, but you're going to get something that can go on your wall. For your phone and your gimbal, you're good to go.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The combination of this and, late model phone is plenty,
Yeah. Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. How about a favorite book or two? Do you read a lot?
I do. I was an English major
Oh, okay.
and I've been a writer for many years, so I'm a book nerd.
Yeah, and you
As
write
far as a
books. Wait,
favorite one,
I forgot to mention your books. I'm reading one of your books now, Mr.
and
Ledbetter's
again, this is going to
Boots.
sound very nerdy, but probably my favorite author of all time is the American historian David McCullough.
Huh,
And
okay.
he is known mostly for his biographies of John Adams and Harry Truman. Both of those are amazing books, but I particularly love his book on the Wright brothers.
Hmm,
So go find David McCullough, The Wright Brothers.
okay.
It is incredible. And, a historian, a book that's written about American history might sound dull until you've read David McCullough. And I
Interesting.
promise it's not dull. Um,
Well, I'll
uh,
look for that,
also,
definitely. I'll pick that up.
yeah. I also love anything by Larry McMurtry.
Yeah, he's great.
I love Andy Weir. Operation Hail Mary
Hmm.
is great. And the most recent thing I've read is Carrying the Fire, which is the autobiography of Michael Collins, who was one of the three Apollo 11 astronauts.
Oh, interesting.
I'm also a space nerd.
Okay.
So I've read all of those guys' autobiographies, and this one by far is the best.
Oh, cool.
It's fantastic.
Well, good. You've added to my list. I love it. That's a
Good.
good thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
And tell us about your books. So I'm reading Mr. Ledbetter's Boots right now, about 2/3 of the way done. Great book, by the way.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, well, Mr. Ledbetter's Boots is my first novel, and that
Okay.
was released last September. It's a book about a Tuskegee Airman veteran from World War II who in the present day is kind of a freak of nature. He's 95 years old
Yeah.
and appears to be more like 70 years old.
Or
And
younger even. I
or
gather younger. Yeah.
yeah, and he is probably America's first, not only mountaineer, but definitely first African American mountaineer. And at 95, he intends to be the oldest known person to complete the Everest Base Camp trek. So he's got a reporter that's traveling with him to cover the story, and that's about all I'm going to give you. There's
It's great so far. They just got to Kathmandu is where I'm at.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Deal. Well, you'll have to let me know. Let me know when you get it knocked out.
I love it. Yeah. 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 Very
But
good.
as far as it relates to what we've been talking about, when I first went to Nepal in 2018, I kept very comprehensive notes every day when I was there because I was blogging at the time,
Hmm.
and I had a blog called Doofus Dad, and it was about kind of the perils of being a dad in the modern day culture in which we find ourselves. So I came back thinking that I was going to blog all these entries from this trip. And one day I just decided, well, that's crazy. I'm just going to write a book about it. So the name of the book is Doofus Dad Does Everest Base Camp. And the subhead is one of planet Earth's epic adventures told by a slightly less than epic guy. And so it's kind of like Dave Barry, Dave Barry and Jack London combined.
There you
go. That book has become kind of mandatory reading for people that want to do the Everest Base Camp trek. And I don't know how that happened, Rick, but it just has, and it's been a blessing.
Well, yeah, I mean, you really describe well, I forget the guy's name, but how he is training and how he is older, and he's just a badass hiker. I mean, at his age, So
well, now you're referring to
Mr. Ledbetter, yeah. Oh, Doofus Dad has become okay.
Doofus Dad is a nonfiction memoir that put out. I put it out in 2018. Okay. So it's completely different from Mr. Ledbetter.
Gotcha.
It just so happened that with Mr. Ledbetter, the idea that I came up with happened to involve that trek as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I've also written a book about the music industry. It's called Blow the Man Down. And that is another memoir about my years in the kind of the big time Nashville music business.
Wow, but that was interesting.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
I'll have to pick that up too. There's got to be some stories in there.
Yes, there is. Yes, there is.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So how can listeners follow up with you if they have any questions, or where can they pick up your books?
Well, you can certainly email me at mark@hobnailtrekkingco.com. You can call us on our toll-free number, and that's 855-462-6245. Easier way to think of it is 855-HOBNAIL, HOBNAIL.
Cool.
My books are all on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and places like that. One thing I would mention is that when I decided to write fiction, I changed my pen name from Mark, middle initial E. Johnson. My pen name for that book is M. Ernest Johnson. So M. Ernest Johnson.
Got it.
So that's how to find me on Amazon. So
we'll link all that stuff in the show notes too. Yeah, we'll put links.
That'd be great. Yeah. So I'm not hard to find. And I'm
good. You can't be if you're running a business these days, right? You got to be.
And we love to talk about trekking and adventure and all these locations. It's what we enjoy.
Yeah.
So it's never a problem to talk to people on the phone. As a matter of fact, tomorrow night, we have a thing called the Everest Base Camp Trek Experience presentation that we're giving. This will be after this podcast comes out. We do a presentation at outdoor retailers all over the Southeast. So we're going to be at REI in Brentwood, Tennessee tomorrow night doing that. So, yeah.
Is that their calendar on your website somewhere to see that, where you guys are going to be?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
It is. We have a page for that. Yeah. So.
Well, thanks, Mark. It's been great talking to you.
Hey, same here, Rick. I've really enjoyed.
I look forward to getting on a walk with you some point.
Well, let's do it.
Yeah, let's plan. That'd be fun.
Get our boots strapped on and go do something.
There you go. All right, man. Thank you.
You bet.
Hey, before we wrap, I've got a special message for you. I know some of you have a podcast rolling around your brain, or already have a podcast you'd like to polish up a bit. I'm excited to announce that I'm partnering with Tracy DeFord's Stephanie Euler and the Produce Your Podcast team to get it out of your head and into your followers' ears. Tracy and her team have helped me grow and monetize my show, and podcasters trust them because they deliver. Go to ricksays.com/PYP to get all the details. Let's get your show created, produced, and on the air today. Go to ricksays.com/PYP and get all the deets, and let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Outdoor Biz Podcast. Be sure to visit our website, theoutdoorbizpodcast.com, where you'll find show notes with links to everything we talked about and more. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. And while you're at it, if you found value in this show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or spread the word and tell a friend. That would really help us out too. Be sure to tune in every week, and thanks again for listening to the Outdoor Biz Podcast with Rick Says.